Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Miss Hope's Reading Hour. So, my friends, we had some technical difficulties, um, but I fixed them. So, everyone's on. I see everyone is on, thank goodness. I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on? It's saying that people aren't on, like they can't get on. What is going on? So, I figured out how to fix it. For those of you who don't know, there's now a new Facebook, apparently. So that kind of messed everything up a little bit, but I was able to fix it. And here I am. Here is Miss Hope on Miss Hope's Reading Hour on this wonderful Wednesday at our new school time. Okay. So remember, everybody was supposed to vote, and people did vote. I will say there weren't like a huge amount of votes, but hey, your vote counts if you vote. Okay. And most people voted for our time to be 6 p.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So guess what? For all of those people who voted for 6 o'clock, which was more than any other vote, that is what time we are on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, unless something happens. Okay. So, welcome to another wonderful Wednesday installment of Miss Hope's Reading Hour. Now, how was your Monday? How was your Tuesday? I know on Tuesday, many kids, many of you students here in Philadelphia were like, okay, I got to go to bed. I got to make sure, I'm up in the morning on Wednesday because today was the first day of school. It was the first day of school. So it was the first day of virtual school. So, yeah, it's different. Some of the students in my classroom were saying, I want to go back to school. The school bus, like they were talking about the school bus and getting on the school bus and coming to school. But we had a great day. Of course, just like what happened with Miss Hope's Reading Hour, there were a few technical difficulties. But with all that being said, we had a pretty good day. A very good day, I would say. My class had art today. We drew some things today. We talked about this book called The Dot. I think I should get that book to read to you guys, and I drew my own dot. Wait a minute, where's my book? I want to show you my dot. I had to draw it really fast because we were running out of time. So hopefully one day you guys will hear that story on Miss Hope's Reading Hour, or if you happen to be curious and you want to ask your parents to get you that book, hey, you can always get it before we read it. So if you can see it, this is my dot. I drew my dots. I was like, how do I want my dot to look? And so I just went, let's just create something, our own unique dot. And that was my dot that I created today. So unfortunately, I didn't get to take a picture of my students' dots, but they were all really nice. And it was a fun activity. We had a lot of fun, played some games, learned a lot of stuff, learned how to use new things, and it went surprisingly well. Okay. So I hope that your first day of virtual school, whether you already started, whether you started today or you're going to start later on in September, I hope that your first day of virtual school goes really smoothly and well. And for those of you who are meeting face to face, hopefully school is going well. You're getting used to wearing your mask and stuff like that. So I hope that you all have a great school year. And after school is done, you have some time to play, do some homework, and then you're trying to wind down at the end of your school day. My student friends, my parent friends, my parent teacher friends, you can unwind with some good books here on Miss Hope's Reading Hour on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at our new back to school time, 6 p.m. Okay? So, since we are starting in the evening, I wanted to read some night books. And I was like, when am I going to get to read these two books? Because they kind of have to do with like nighttime and bedtime. And so I was like, And then when I realized, we're going to have to change the time for Miss Hope's reading hour. So I said, once I change the time, it'll be a perfect time to read these nighttime books. Okay. So one of them is an old classic. I did not know that this book was this old. And the other one, I heard of it before, but I had never seen the book or read it. Okay, so let's go through the first one, which is the old classic. Okay, it is called Harold and the Purple Crayon. This is the 60th anniversary of this book. Can you believe it? This book has been out for more than 60 years. Wait a minute, I'm trying to see when this book was written. Oh, it doesn't have it in it. Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Let's see. This book was originally written in 1955. Can you believe it? Harold and the Purple Crayon by Crockett Johnson. We're going to read this classic here today. Also, we're going to read this book. It is called Max and the Tag-Along Moon by Floyd Cooper. We're going to read this book today as well. Now, I told you I heard of this book before. I had never seen it or read it. So it is a pretty nice to read it because I did read through it earlier today. And of course, it's heating up, y'all. Belly Up by Stuart Gibbs. Our mystery about how poor Henry the Hippo went belly up. So I'll get to where we are once we get to that part of Miss Hope's reading hour. If I go through it too much, I want to start reading it. So we'll just wait to fill people in on where we are in the story once we get to the chapter book portion, okay? So let us go to our first book, Harold and the Purple Crayon by Crockett Johnson. One evening, after thinking it over for some time, Harold decided to go for a walk in the moonlight. Over that way. There you go. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot our ambiance. You know we can't forget that. We cannot forget our ambiance. Can't. There wasn't any moon, and Harold needed a moon to walk in the moonlight. And he needed something to walk on. What better thing to do than to make something? He made a long straight path so he wouldn't get lost. And he set off on his walk, taking his big purple crayon with him. But he didn't seem to be getting anywhere on the long straight path. So he left the path for a shortcut across the field, and the moon went with him. The shortcut led right to where Harold thought a forest ought to be. He didn't want to get lost in the woods, so he made a very small forest with just one tree in it. That's a pretty small forest. It turned out to be an apple tree. The apples would be very tasty, Harold thought, when they got red. So he put a frightening dragon under the tree to guard the apples. It was a terribly frightening dragon. It even frightened Harold. He backed away. His hand holding the purple crayon shook. Suddenly, he realized what was happening. But by then, Harold was over his head in the ocean. He came up thinking fast, and in no time, he was climbing aboard a trim little boat. He quickly set sail, and the moon sailed along with him. After he had sailed long enough, Harold made land without much trouble. He stepped ashore on the beach, wondering where he was. The sandy beach reminded Harold of picnics, and the thought of picnics made him hungry. So he laid out a nice, simple picnic lunch. There was nothing but pie, but there were all 9 kinds of pie that Harold liked best. 9 kinds of pie? I don't know that I like 9 kinds of pie. Maybe I do. I don't know. When Harold finished his picnic, there was quite a lot left. He hated to see so much delicious pie go to waste. So what was about to eat that pie? So Harold left a very hungry moose and a deserving porcupine to finish it up. And off he went, looking for a hill to climb to see where he was. Harold knew that the higher up he went, the farther he could see. So he decided to make the hill into a mountain. If he went high enough, he thought, he could see the window of his bedroom. He was tired, and he felt he ought to be getting to bed. He hoped he could see his bedroom window from the top of the mountain. But as he looked down over the other side, he slipped. And there wasn't any other side of the mountain. He was falling in thin air. But luckily, he kept his wits and his purple crayon. He made a balloon and he grabbed onto it. And he made a basket under the balloon big enough to stand in. He had a fine view from the balloon, but he couldn't see his window. He couldn't even see a house. So he made a house with windows, and he landed the balloon on the grass in the front yard. None of the windows was his window. He tried to think where his window ought to be. He made some more windows. He made a big building full of windows. He made lots of buildings full of windows. He made a whole city full of windows. But none of the windows was his window. He couldn't think where it might be. He decided to ask a policeman. The policeman pointed the way Harold was going anyway, but Harold thanked him. As he walked along with the moon, wishing he was in his room and in his bed, then suddenly Harold remembered. What did he remember? Let's see. He remembered where his bedroom window was when there was a moon. It was always right around the moon. And then Harold made his bed. He got in it and he drew up the covers. The purple crayon dropped on the floor, and Harold dropped off to sleep. The end. Wow. That is a good book. That book may have been read to me when I was younger, but I don't remember. But this is a really good book. Imagine just laying in your bed, imagining yourself just drawing your way through the city, through the forest and through the city and up a mountain and in a balloon, all while you're laying in your bed trying to go to sleep. I think that would be relaxing. I do. to just imagine those things. Or even if you had like like some paper or a book and your crayons or markers and stuff, and you're just drawing while you're trying to relax before you go to bed. I could see some of you possibly falling asleep, all while you're using your imagination and draw where you would go. I can see it. I can see that happening to me too. All right, so for our next book, Max and the Tag Along Moon by Floyd Cooper. All right. I like the pictures in this book too. The pictures are really nice. Max and the Tag Along Moon. When was this book written? In 2013, really? I don't know why I thought it was older. All right. One night, as Max was leaving Grandpa's house, he reached up to give Grandpa a big hug goodbye. In the sky behind Grandpa appeared a big, fine moon. Look, Grandpa, the moon. That old moon will always shine for you. On and on. Grandpa and Max gazed quietly at the big moon together as it embraced them in soft yellow light. Max smiled at the moon and Grandpa and then climbed into the car. Goodbye, Grandpa. Goodbye, Moon. As the car pulled away, Max kept his eyes on Grandpa until he disappeared from sight. And all he saw was the moon. Max kept his eyes on that moon, waiting for it to disappear too. The long ride home was swervy-curvy, this way and that, all the way. And the moon seemed to tag along. Max giggled as he watched the beautiful bright orb flicker through the passing trees, trailing behind the car as it traveled home this way and that, playing peekaboo. Up a hill, down a hill, the moon was ever there. Over a bridge, around a curve, the moon bounced along. Around a tree, past a field of sleeping cows, the moon stayed quietly with Max. Through a small town with roundabout streets, Max gazed as the moon kept up. How does the moon do that? At the mouth of a tunnel and out the other end, Max smiled when he saw the moon there, waiting. Dark clouds tumbled across the night sky. The stars and nightingales all faded away. Max searched the darkness and wondered, where is the moon? Grandpa said it would always shine for me. Oh boy, where did it go? Finally home, Max took one last look up at the empty night sky. I guess that old moon couldn't shine for me all the way home. Upstairs in bed, the room was dark. Max felt alone. He missed Grandpa. He missed that tag-along moon. I bet you would. The moon is beautiful. Then slowly, very slowly, Max's bedroom began to fill with a soft yellow glow. The clouds faded away and the moon peeked through. Max gazed up at that magic ball of light and thought about what Grandpa said. That old moon will always shine for me, on and on. Max knew that wherever he saw the moon, he would think of Grandpa, on and on. He slept soundly, embraced in soft yellow light. The end. Oh, that was such a great story. Very good story. Very relaxing. So, do you guys like the moon? Do you like the stars? Do you like to look up at the sky? I love looking up at the sky. I like taking pictures of the sky. Oh, my nose is itching. Oh, sorry, my nose was itching. I love looking up at the night sky. One of my favorite things to do is to take pictures of clouds and the moon. Those are my two favorite things to take pictures of. So, which one do you like more? Do you like the daytime sky or do you like the nighttime sky better? Let me think. I can't pick because during the daytime, the clouds are all big and puffy sometimes. And then at night, the clouds sometimes make different colors in the sky, or when it's a perfectly clear sky, depending on where you are, like if you're in the country or the city, or you're kind of a little bit away from big buildings, you can see all the stars in the sky. So I can't pick my favorite time. I like both of them. That was a very good story. Very good. All right, so now, my friends, we must get to Belly Up. We got to get to it because some things have happened in the story. If you were not here on Wednesday, you missed a big break in the story, okay? You missed it. If you weren't here, okay? So, Summer and Teddy went to see one of the characters that walks around Fun Jungle that people take pictures with. Okay. His name is Larry the Lizard. That was the name actually of chapter 11, Larry the Lizard. Okay. And they wanted to ask Larry the Lizard, who did you, because he told Summer, I know who made Henry go belly up. They had to find out who it was. So they go to see him. Of course, Summer is not dressed in her pink and she has a hat on so no one knows who she is. So she goes in, but Mr. Connor, what is his name? Charlie Connor. So Charlie Connor, he recognizes her and he's like, oh my goodness, you're that McCracken girl. You're Summer McCracken. So, of course, all of the employees who were down there wanted to take pictures with her and get autographs and all this stuff. But then she wants to talk to him alone. So her and Teddy talk to Charlie Connor alone. And finally, Teddy says, who killed Henry? And he implicates Pete Thwacker. But he says, Pete Thwacker wasn't the one who did it. He had someone else do it. And guess who that person was that he says he thinks Pete Thwacker had to do it? Large Marge, the security guard. Can you believe it? So that is where we are, friends. But we don't know if that is actually what happened. So we have to read more of the story. As you can see, we finished all of this and now we're here. Okay? So we have to find out what happened. Back to the story. I looked to Summer. She seemed happy with what she'd heard. I wasn't quite so satisfied, though. There were still a few things bothering me about the whole situation. But before I could ask anything else, the tattooed man shouted, "Supervisor's coming!" Instantly, the room became chaos. Lazy actors were suddenly full of energy, stubbing out their cigarettes and squirming into their suits as fast as they could. Charlie snatched his lizard head off the floor and slammed it onto his shoulders. "Gotta go," he said. Then he grabbed my arm and pulled me close. "In case anyone asks you, you didn't hear anything from me. If I get in any trouble because of this, I'll come find you." Even though it was coming from a giant lizard, the tone of his voice still scared me. Charlie turned to go, but in his haste, he slammed into an open locker, denting his nose. "Dang it," he muttered. "I've got to get a real job." Then he slipped into the tunnel and vanished from sight. Chapter 12. Buck. It was a good thing the Carnivore Canyon grand opening party wasn't that night, because Mom was so angry at me for running off that she probably wouldn't have let me go. I'd never seen her so upset in my life. She'd been worried sick, even though I'd left a note and alerted security to keep an eye out for me. It spoke to how crummy Fun Jungle's security was that I'd been running around the park for over an hour and no one had spotted me. After chewing me out, Mom planted me in a chair in her office and didn't leave again until it was time to go home for the night. Then she marched me back out to our trailer, made me dinner, and sent me right to my room. She also confiscated my phone so I couldn't communicate with Summer. That was frustrating because I knew Summer was probably in a heap of trouble as well. Once we left the dressing room, she checked her phone and found about 100 messages from her mother and her bodyguards. I got a split, she told me, and raced out the front gates to grab a cab. I hadn't heard from her since, and now wondered if she'd even be allowed to go to the gala event the next night, let alone bring a date. I told Mom what I'd learned, of course. I tried to leave Charlie out, but she dragged his name out of me. I wanted her to know I disobeyed her for a good reason, my own safety. If Pete and Marge really killed Henry, then they're also the ones who tried to kill me, I explained. We should tell the police. The police aren't going to believe that story for 1 second, Mom told me. Why not? Because I don't even believe it. Pete Thwacker doesn't know a thing about hippos, and Marge is even dumber. You really think those two blockheads could put together that plan to kill Henry? Maybe, I said, although the truth was, this had already occurred to me. It was what had bothered me about Charlie's story. A couple weeks earlier, Pete had actually remarked at a press conference that hippopotamuses were basically whales with legs. I didn't doubt that he might have truly wanted Henry dead, or maybe that Marge would have been willing to do it for extra pay. But the two of them seemed more likely to go the poisoning or shooting route than doing something as subtle as killing Henry slowly via periodontitis. Still, that didn't mean they couldn't have done it. There's no maybe here, Mom told me. It's completely implausible. What if they got help from someone else, like one of the hippo keepers? They'd know how to kill Henry without making it look like a crime. Mom just shot me an angry look, as though the idea of one of the keepers would help kill their own animal was offensive to her. Then she got up, went into the adjoining office, and made a phone call. I didn't find out who she'd called until later that night. I was sitting in my room, reading, when Mom came in and said I had a visitor. I stepped out into our little kitchen and found Buck Grassley there. "Evening, Teddy," he said. "Your mother tells me you've been looking into Henry's death on your own." Unlike a lot of the other adults at Fun Jungle, Buck always talked to me like I was a grown-up. He didn't seem upset that I'd been investigating. Instead, he seemed to be intrigued, like he was my grandpa asking how school had been that day. "I guess," I replied. Buck chuckled a bit. "It's a nice night," he said. "Why don't we have a little chat outside?" It wasn't really a question. He held the door open for us. I looked to Mom. She nodded that it was all right. So I went out. We had a couple of cheap Target lawn chairs set up outside our door facing the woods. Mom and Dad liked to sit there at night, stare up at the sky, and imagine they were back in Africa. Ever the gentleman, Buck waited for Mom and I to sit before he did. It was still humid out, but the heat of the day had broken. The stars were bright and the woods were alive with the chirp of crickets. "Your mother tells me you talked to Charlie Connor today," Buck said. "He told you Pete Thwacker and one of my own people might have had something to do with Henry's death?" I thought it was interesting that he didn't call Large Marge by her name or call Henry's death a murder. "That's right. I don't suppose Charlie told you what he did before he was in the circus?" "No, he was in jail." I swallowed hard, worried. Charlie had threatened me not to mention his name, and I had. And now he turned out to be a criminal? For what? armed robbery. You mean like from banks? No, nothing that big. He mugged people. Just a two-bit thug. Mom stared at Buck, even more upset than me. You hired an ex-con to work as a mascot? Buck shrugged. He'd served his time. Got early parole for good behavior. The system considers him reformed. I'm all for giving people a second chance, Mom said. But he's a mascot here? Most of that job is working with children. You couldn't have given him a behind the scenes position instead? I'm in security, not personnel. From what I understand, there's not a whole lot of people lining up to work as a mascot. Those suits are hot and uncomfortable, and we've got to put people in them. I understand your concern, though. I have it too. So I've kept an eye on Charlie. Do you think he's dangerous? To people? Not really. Charlie never actually used a weapon on anyone. He only used it to scare his victims. When he got busted, there weren't even bullets in the gun. But animals might be a different story. I know he likes to hunt, so he's killed animals before. And he did have a grudge against Henry. So you think maybe he murdered Henry, I asked? And then accused Pete and Marge to distract attention from himself? Buck just gave another shrug. First of all, we still don't have any proof Henry was murdered. I almost interrupted him to say that wasn't true, that I'd even found evidence of the murder, but Mom signaled me to keep my mouth shut. So I did. But if someone did try to harm the hippo, I think Charlie would be as much a suspect as anyone else. Certainly more than one of my own people. I know Marge has a big beef with you, Teddy, but that doesn't mean she's a bad person. Understood? I stifled a smile. Understood. Buck suddenly leaned forward, fixing me with a hard stare, sorry. The thing is, these investigations can get dangerous. Someone's already made one attempt to scare you off, and you could have been seriously hurt. Now, there's a known felon in the mix. So from now on, let me and my people handle this, okay? This is a big park. I'm sure you and Miss McCracken can find something else to occupy your time here. I reacted with surprise, which was exactly what Buck was expecting. Now that he had me on the hook, he let me wriggle a bit. He picked a chunk of cedar wood off the ground, took his Bowie knife from its holster, and started to whittle, carefully shaving off the bark. Remember how we have all those cameras everywhere? He asked. Well, we've been reviewing all the tapes of Hippo River from the last few days. So we've got plenty of footage of you two and your little swim party. That was all my idea. I spoke so quickly. I wasn't even sure why I said it. Trying to protect Summer just seemed like the right thing to do. Was it now? The tone of Buck's voice indicated he knew Summer well enough to guess whose idea it really was. He and Mom shared a smile, as though they thought my attempt at chivalry was cute. What exactly were you doing in there? Looking for the murder weapon? Did you find it? I hesitated before answering, then realized this was as good as an answer. Sorry. Yes, I admitted. Where is it? Doc has it. Buck didn't seem quite sure how to respond to that. He fell silent for a bit, like he was mentally jotting down notes. I realized I just dragged Doc into the investigation, which would probably make him even more annoyed at me than usual. But it still felt right in telling Buck about the weapon. I was glad someone in law enforcement was finally showing an interest in Henry's murder. I also felt some relief in letting Buck take over. After all, he was right. It was getting dangerous. The incident at World of Reptiles had been scary, but somehow learning that Charlie Connor was a felon was even more unsettling. It seemed no one at Fun Jungle was exactly what they appeared to be. I wondered how many other people were hiding something. Why'd you give it to Doc? Buck asked. I didn't really. He took it. You mean he stole it from you? No, I went to show it to him because I thought he'd want to see it. He suspected Henry was murdered during the autopsy, but couldn't find the weapon. I explained everything that happened the day. I explained everything that happened at the vet lab that day. How there'd been someone else in the operating room with Doc. How Doc had seemed on edge and taken the jack from me. How I'd caught a glimpse of the dead jaguar. Whoa there. Doc looked up from his whittling. What dead jaguar? It must have come from Carnivore Canyon, I guess. Doc was doing an autopsy on it. You mean to see if someone had killed it too? No, Mom said. Nothing like that. It was just Doc's policy to autopsy an animal that dies at the park. So, he doesn't suspect that there's a serial animal murderer here? No, he thinks Henry is the only animal that's been killed. Mom suddenly seemed to doubt her statement and looked at me. Is that right? As far as I know, I agreed. But he still autopsies everything anyhow? Buck asked. Yes, Mom said, to determine the cause of death so that similar deaths can be prevented. Duck had chewed his toothpick to pulp. He tossed it aside, then shaved off a new sliver of wood and stuck it in his mouth. Teddy, you keep referring to this murder weapon as a jack. Can you describe it to me? I did. Then I explained how anyone could have picked up a package of jacks at Fun Jungle Emporium, turned them into murder weapons, and easily fed them to Henry. Buck listened intently, nodded thoughtfully, his mood darkening the whole time. I think he was starting to grasp that I was no longer just some bored kid crying wolf. Although I'd have thought the murder attempt at World of Reptiles would have convinced him of that. Mom grew more intrigued as she listened as well. All these cameras you've got, Buck, are any of them aimed at the tourist areas of Hippo River? Plenty. So you could go through all the tapes from the days before Henry died and see if you can spot the killer throwing the jacks into Henry's mouth? Buck frowned. In theory, yes. But if it's as simple to feed Henry as Teddy says, then I doubt the tapes will do us any good. If the killer knows about the cameras, and I have good reason to suspect he does, then there are plenty of ways he could have avoided being filmed. Going to the most crowded viewpoint and blending in with everyone else? Or maybe wadding the jacks in some bread and giving it to a child to feed to Henry, or wearing a disguise. A baseball cap down low over his eyes could be enough. Plus, We all know hundreds of people threw food to Henry every day. How could we tell which one of them was the killer? Good point. Mom looked defeated as she said it. Did you ever find out why all the cameras in Reptile World went down? I asked. Power failure, Buck replied. Only those cameras? Mom asked. Yes, a fuse blew in the room where the recordings are kept. At the exact time that the mamba was being let out? That seems awfully suspicious. Yes, Buck admitted. Yes, it does. Could the fuse have tripped manually? Mom asked. It could. Where is it? Inside the administration building. You need official access to get in there, Mom said. Sounds like this is an inside job. Oh, I don't think there was ever any doubt of that. Buck stood and stretched. Well, it's late, and I've got a long drive home. I hope you've taken this little talk to heart, Teddy. I have, sir, I said. I have your word you're done investigating? Sure. Good to hear. Buck tousled my hair and smiled. Am I in trouble for going into Henry's pool? Buck chuckled. For what? Showing a little gumption? Nothing wrong with that. Reminds me of a kid I knew growing up around here. A little squirt named James John McCracken. He turned out all right. Buck sheathed his knife, then added, Of course, JJ always knew when to leave well enough alone. Hopefully, you do too. Then he ambled off toward the employee parking lot. I turned to Mom, expecting to be sent straight to bed, but to my surprise, she wasn't even looking at me. She was just staring after Buck, lost in thought. I went inside and headed for my room. Where do you think you're going? Mom asked. I looked back through the screen door. I thought I was grounded. Not anymore. I'm not? Mom shook her head. I'm not saying I'm happy about what you did, but I see now that you didn't have much choice. You told me Henry had been murdered, but I didn't help you. No one did. Mom came inside and pointed to a seat at the table. I sat while she cut slices of cake for both of us. Do you think Buck can be the killer? I asked. Mom took her time before answering. I'm not sure, she admitted. Buck's a good man, but I'm not so sure he's coming at this the right way. Why not? Well, he seems far more concerned about Charlie than Pete and Marge. Now, yes, Charlie has a criminal past, but I find it hard to believe he'd kill Henry for revenge. If he really was angry at the hippo, wouldn't he have killed it back in the circus? Why wait until now? I don't think Charlie knows that much about animals, I said. I was having a hard time imagining him doing something so clever as using the jacks to kill Henry or freeing the mamba. Plus, he wasn't tall enough to cut the glass on the mamba's exhibit without using a step stool. Pete doesn't know anything about animals either, Mom admitted. But then maybe that's all an act. He was a very successful PR man at some of JJ's other companies before he was transferred here. He can't be as much of an idiot as he sometimes seems. Do you think he and Marge killed Henry? Mom sighed, then sat with a glass of milk. I don't know. I can see the motive. Henry's been a constant thorn in Pete's side. I can even see Pete getting so frustrated that he'd say he wanted Henry dead. I just can't see him going through with it. I can see Marge doing it, I said. She's mean. Can you see Marge coming up with a plan with the Jacks? No, but I can imagine her feeding them to Henry if someone told her to do it. How about setting the Mamba free? I thought about that for a bit. Maybe if she thought it'd scare me, not to kill me though. Mom took a long gulp of milk, then said, I think Buck might be biased toward investigating an ex-con rather than his own employees, although there's plenty of other people who could have done this as well. Like who? We will end there, my friends. So, as much as Teddy and Summer thought they were hidden in what they were doing, Buck Grassley seemed to already know that they were investigating. And at first, Teddy's mom didn't necessarily think that he had anything to investigate until she heard him telling Buck Grassley about everything he knew. And it made her think, maybe there is something to this investigation, and maybe Teddy didn't have a choice but to investigate. So, is Teddy's mom going to join him in this investigation? Does Buck Grassley have something to do with Henry going belly up? Was it really Pete Thwacker and Large Marge? Or was Charlie Connor still upset about Henry biting him in the leg, that he wanted to do something to him for revenge? There's a lot of questions, friends. Well, we are at the end of our first school time of Miss Hope's Reading Hour. Thank you so much for being here with me this evening. Hopefully you enjoyed the stories that we read. Let's show them again. Classic, written in 1955, over 60 years old. Harold and the Purple Crayon by Crockett Johnson. And also probably a new classic. I love this book because I like looking at the moon. Max and the Tagalong Moon by Floyd Cooper. Very nice book. And of course, Belly Up by Stuart Gibbs. We're getting into it. It's heating up. We're going to find out who did it. I think we're all probably going to be surprised. So, with all of that being said, thank you so much for joining me here on Miss Hope's Reading Hour at our new time. I look forward to seeing you again at 6 o'clock with no technical difficulties on Miss Hope's Reading Hour on a fabulous Friday. Okay? So make sure you get some dinner. Make sure you relax. Make sure you get to bed at a good time so you can wake up for school and do a great job tomorrow. Okay? Have a great Thursday, and I will see you right back here at 6 p.m. on a fabulous Friday on Miss Hope's Reading Hour. Until then, see you next.